Hi, everybody. Welcome to Soul Seeing for Lent. I'm your host, Mike Leach, and our guest today is Natalia Imperatori-Lee, and I'm very grateful that she's here. I'm also grateful to all of you who are watching. I want to tell you our last Lenten Soul Seeing with Father was the largest ever viewing of this kind of series for NCR. And so we're very grateful to all of you, all the people who are listening in today, including Rose Bunda from Milano, Julie Durkin Montague from Chicago, Paige Doyle from here in Stanford. Hi, Paige. To Sensia Jean Charles from Haiti, and to Vicki Leach, who is in the living room. Natalia, is that your office?
This is my actual work office. It is my triumphant return to my work office after a really long time.
Well, welcome back. It's beautiful. I like your little Pope Francis.
Oh,
And
thanks.
is that photographs of your children?
These are my children when they were much younger. Benjamin in the green frame and William in the yellow frame. I think they were like 4 and 7 when we had those pictures made.
How old are they now?
They are now 16 and 11. Oh, 15 and 11. Oops.
That's awesome. That's great. We have 2 boys too, and they're 50 and 49. So
it's exactly the same.
At least they're out of the house.
That's true.
So that's a good thing. Now, people probably know already that you are a professor of religious studies at Manhattan College, which is one of the best colleges in the New York City area, especially for religion. And you're also the author of a new book that I'm going to hold up. Ta-da! Quintana.
Beautiful.
Now, this is a wonderful book. It's a scholarly book, and it's about seeing the church through the lens of the Hispanic experience, which is kind of a new narrative that's very beautiful. But why don't you tell us all, Quintana, what does that mean?
So cuéntame is a great word. It's a word I heard all the time growing up. It has at least 2 meanings that are my go-tos. Cuéntame is in colloquial, like on a telephone. When you sit down to chat with somebody for a long time, you're like, hey, what's up? Catch me up. What's been going on? You sit down, you settle in a comfy chair, and you say, cuéntame, like tell me what's new. So that's the first meaning, which I got from overhearing my mom talk on the phone. Like that's one of my mom's classic phrases. So I was a bit of a gossip as a child, and I used to listen in all her conversations. And I would hear that phrase over and over again. So it was a good kind of cue to listen in.
Your parents were from Cuba.
Yeah, exactly. Both of my parents were born in Cuba. I was born in Miami. The second meaning of cuéntame is more of a demographic or an accounting demand. So kind of like a don't leave me out. And that's why I thought it was a good title for the book, because it's both an invitation to listen in on narratives from the Latinx community, but also a demand to be included in the present of the church, not just relegated to its future or its imagined past.
That's beautiful. And in your Soul Seeing column, which people can read on ncronline.org, you call the Lenten column Lent in the Subjunctive, a weird in-between time. Explain yourself.
It was easy to do. So I've been sharing a home office with my very intelligent 15-year-old, and he is learning Spanish a little bit from scratch. Certainly not, he's not a native speaker like I am. And they're learning the subjunctive, which is hard. It's not an easy tense or an easy, like it's a mood or a voice to learn, because we don't use it in English that much. English is far more in the indicative, right? We talk about what is and what we're gonna do, and everything is very real, but the subjunctive is very different. It's about wishes and intentions, and it's all very dependent on other realities. And his teacher, the great Mrs. Tate, formerly Señorita del Val, gave them an acronym that they can use when thinking about the subjunctive, and the acronym was WEIRDO.
Weirdo.
And I thought I love that word. And it's a great sort of prompt for wishes and intentions and expectations and things like that. Those are your cues for when you need to use the subjunctive. That reminded me of an essay by Roberto Goizueta, another great Cuban-American theologian. And he wrote an essay called Fiesta, Life in the Subjunctive. And it was all about how Latinx communities, in his case, he was studying a Mexican-American community. It was all about how that our communities live in this dependent in-between existence, right? Where things are sort of terrible for a lot of members of our community. There's a lot of poverty and illness, but there's also room for celebration despite, or celebration as commemoration, right? This sort of subjunctive living that we know that our lives are dependent on realities outside of ourselves, but nevertheless feel like it's important to pause and almost do like this countercultural moment of joy to say, yes, my life is not, totally my own, and that I am God's and I belong to a community and I belong to forces outside myself. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to take a moment to be grateful for even this life of dependence on God.
That's wonderful. That's one of the great characteristics, I think, that our Americans from the South, Hispanic, Latina Americans bring, is this sense of inclusiveness and joy and family and fiesta. Tell us about Fiesta and how that fits into Lent.
So this is a super weird Lent, isn't it? Because I started the column by saying, is it Lent again or is it Lent still?
Yeah, is it Lent still for the third year? What's going on?
We've been Lenting for a month, for a year now. I can't believe it's March again. Nothing has changed since last March, or very little anyway.
I haven't left the house.
Neither have we. This is the first time I'm in my office in a really long time. And again, I feel like I'm sacrificing a ton, but I'm not sacrificing nearly. People have lost, there's been an immeasurable amount of loss.
Yeah.
People have lost so many loved ones. There are 500,000 Americans have died.
Yeah.
People all over the world have died and are dying. Some people have COVID long haul and are, permanently going to be living with this disease. So, we have already surrendered so much that the thought of, let's give something up for Lent was almost offensive. I've given up enough, and people have given up a lot more than me. People are losing their businesses, their livelihoods. So I was like, how can we be countercultural this Lent? Or how can we think counterculturally in this Lenten time? And I thought the subjunctive was a good frame for that.
Give us an acronym weirdo, what the letters stand for.
Oh God, I hope I remember. Okay, so weirdo, wishes, intentions, or I have to look that up. Expectations, requirements, doubt, and the last one is ojalá, which is a word in Spanish that's actually derived from an Arabic word, and it means hopefully. Right?
So we're in this in-between weird time between giving up and the expectation for something more. What do we hope for?
Well, I think it's important that we acknowledge that we're in a real in-between time, right? The pandemic and being forced to be home with our loved ones, away from our offices, away from our routines, has lifted the veil on a lot of ugly realities, I think, about our country and about our lives. And we're out of this kind of crossroad opportunity, not unlike Jesus in the desert, right? Jesus goes into the desert after his baptism, so sort of closing a chapter of his young life that we don't have a ton of access to. But before he begins his public ministry, he decides that it's time to take a pause so that he can make that shift. And I think that we can use this super weirdo Lent to do that same shift, that in between. We're between a past where we were taking a lot of things for granted, where we were sort of assuming that our children would be in school all of the time, that people that we loved would always be there, that our health was something we could take for granted.
Mhm.
And now we're moving into a different moment, or we have an opportunity to move into a different moment. The question is, will we go back? Like, what is this new normal going to be? Are we going to allow this Lent, this weird in-between Lentiness? Are we going to just allow it to be a blip? Or are we really going to use it to start creating a new world that is in line with what we've learned about ourselves? Some of those things are, for example, what have we learned? We've learned that the people who we think are essential workers, or we thought were essential workers, are really essential to our lives, right? I'm not only thinking about police and firefighters here. I'm more thinking about grocery store workers, restaurant delivery men. I live in New York. They're keeping us alive.
Yeah.
Delivery people. Teachers.
Oh boy.
Teachers teach. How can we ever look at people who spend their lives and their vocations educating our children and are doing this heroic effort right now and say, I think you deserve a raise?
Yeah. Yeah. How do we get our congressmen to recognize these people by giving a minimum wage that's fair and
Like,
teachers a salary that's fair? How do we do that?
Well, I think Lent is a good time to think about how are we going to make that new world? Who are we going to put pressure on? What is it going to cost us? I think that we realize now that we can go without a lot of the things that we thought we couldn't go without.
Yeah.
We're willing to, cost ourselves a little bit of peace and comfort if it means that the people who have kept us quite literally alive and sane for the last year can have a little more.
We get Grubhub. Do you know what Grubhub is?
I do, yeah.
Yeah, we get Grubhub a lot, and that's a delivery service for food from local restaurants. And I am always, on the tip to give a really good tip for whoever this fella is who drives around with this hot food and delivers it on time. Those are essential people in our lives.
They really are. And I wish that we would pay them as if they were.
$15 an hour. That is so little. Nobody can live on that.
Yeah.
And some people are getting less. That's not right.
It's not. And this Lent really is an opportunity for us to reflect on that, to reflect on, well, what has seemed important to me in the past and what has turned out to be important to me in this last year when so much of the things that I thought were important have been stripped away, And one of those things is the value of community, the value of incarnation, right?
Yeah.
I miss teaching my students in a classroom. It's a completely different job to be through a screen. It's like one of the brothers, I teach at a Lasallian school, one of the brothers said it's like teaching a toaster. You're talking to an appliance. And that's what it feels like sometimes.
Yeah, the kids miss it so much.
Yeah, the children are suffering, the students are suffering, the professors, the teachers, everyone is suffering. So what does that tell us about what we get from communion and community? Right? What we get from being with each other, the importance of incarnation, of bodies in a room together, and the energy we feel from one another. I think that that's a big part of this weirdo Lent for me. As I prepare to come back to the classroom, what am I going to bring with me that I've learned from being away or disembodied? How will I be embodied in a better way?
Yeah. You think it'll be automatic because you'll be so hungry to give? And so hungry for feedback from souls?
I think what this pandemic has taught me as an educator is that a lot of the content that I was really worried about is far less important than this pastoral kind of care that I give my students by checking in with them, by making sure that they're healthy, by seeing that they're taking care of themselves, by being attuned to their different levels of ability and access. In my classes, in my lectures, by being aware of how many of them are also caretakers in their own right. I have a student right now who has a child who had to have surgery. I know these things about them now because I'm literally in their homes. How am I going to take that awareness into teaching in person next year? Well, for one thing, I think I'm going to get a lot less wrapped up in the content that I'm teaching and focus a little bit more on sort of developing relationships with my students, relationships of care and concern.
That's great. Yeah, there's a a discipline called metapsychiatry. Have you ever heard of it?
I've
Um,
not.
it's based on a premise that problems are psychological and solutions are spiritual. And the basic premise of that is that we're all made in the image and likeness of God, so that our purpose is to be a beneficial presence to others. So the content of what we say is not important. It's our presence and the love that we express that is real inside of us. And maybe that's something that we can bring to the other side.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I think it's really important. I think it's something that teachers of younger children certainly focus on, but those of us who are college professors tend to be like, "Oh, that's beneath me."
Yeah.
But it's really not. It's such a central part of being in community together.
Yeah, you can feel when you're loved. And I think somebody behind the cash register can feel your gratitude when you say it, and when you say it with meaning.
Mm-hmm.
You think?
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, absolutely. And where would we be without them?
They're awesome.
Yeah.
And we're breathing on them. Everybody's breathing on them. And there they are, packing our bags.
Well, and Mike, I think it's important that we mention that a lot of these people are from communities of color,
Mm-hmm.
and from the sort of underside of our power structures, political power structures, economic power structures. Many of them, at least in the Bronx where I shop, are Latinx, right? Dominican, Puerto Rican, Central and South American. And I think it's important that in all of our rhetoric about communities of color, we realize how much of our day-to-day existence is dependent on the Latinx community, the Black community, right? The people who are staffing our grocery stores, our restaurants, our delivery services, etc.
That is so true. I'd say almost all of them are.
Yeah.
And I think that this is an opportunity not only to thank them, but by our whole presence to let them know that we're glad that they are here in this country.
And to turn that also into kind of political action and say,
you're just an ordinary person. What kind of political action can one do who's maybe too old to march or too busy with family and work to
call Congress?
Oh, I've done that a million times. And you leave a message with somebody.
Yeah, call and
that doesn't seem to work.
But even if we agitate with the small businesses in our community, right? Encouraging our small businesses to take better care of their employees, encouraging our local officials to be more compassionate, encouraging our local officials to be mindful of the way the police force is deployed against people of color. Things of that nature, I think, are vital and are, I think, important Lenten disciplines that we can take with us. Another huge mark of this Lent, or of this pandemic year / Lent, has been this racial reckoning, as people's reawakening to the importance of political action and action on behalf of social justice. Is that going to be a 1-year plan, or is that something that we're going to take into 2022?
That's really beautiful what you're saying, because what you're saying now, Natalia, is this Lent, we don't give something up. We give something in.
I think that's exactly right. We're not denying ourselves, but rather trying to give more of ourselves, if that's appropriate. I mean, there are some people I'm sure out there who are giving already so much of themselves. I'm looking at you, moms with small children. So maybe your Lenten practice is to stop beating yourself up for not being perfect all the time, or not being exactly the kind of mom that you want to be, exactly the kind of spouse, exactly the kind of worker. That has been one of my sort of Lenten disciplines, to speak to myself with a little bit more kindness and stop beating myself up.
We have a question from my friend Peter Gilmore, who I bet you know too. Peter Gilmore is a theologian from Chicago.
Yes, let's hear it.
Catholic Theological, or Loyola. Peter, hi. Peter writes, you have written about extra parochial practices in the Latinx community. What might some extra parochial practices from the Latinx traditions that would enhance our spiritual practices during the pandemic?
That's a great question, Peter. And it's, I think that all of us have started cultivating, or many of us who don't have access to our parishes and our churches, have already begun cultivating some of these extra parochial or non-church or sort of co-church practices. So are you praying at home with your kids? Are you meeting in small groups with other Catholics to talk about the readings or to reflect spiritually, even if it's on Zoom? Some of the extra parochial groups that I featured were kind of these sodalities, people who met separately from their parishes and were part of a bunch of different parishes, but they came together to share prayer, to share life experience and reflection on scripture. That's certainly an extra parochial practice that I think that we can all cultivate. We've certainly, in our house, we do a lot more at home now because we don't have access to church, to the building. And so, quite frankly, isn't really doing it for us anymore. You know, if you're Zooming all day at school, the last thing you want to do is Zoom a church service.
No,
So,
I'm sorry. Go on.
I was just going to say, we're doing, you know, the CRS rice bowl at home with the kids. We talk about it. We maybe watch a video on Timor-Leste. We do a little search with the Atlas to talk about what's going on. We think about scripture in that regard, and then we move forward. Those are important home-based practices that I think keep that spirit alive for our families and our communities.
Yes. What about those specifically from the Latinx tradition?
Well, I know I grew up doing lots of things at home that had very little to do with what was going on at Mass. So when I was growing up, we prayed rosaries at home, novena rosaries when somebody died, rosaries on the anniversary for 9 months after. We participated in processions. We kept a small home altar, and I do this at home in my apartment as well. Home altars with different iconography that, again, are very hands-on. The children can look at and point to. They can say, what is this? Who is that? And that offers an opportunity for conversation and catechesis. Mm-hmm. So the home altars, the Day of the Dead, remembering ancestors, talking about them.
That's right? Wonderful.
All of these are spiritual practices that we do.
They certainly are, especially remembering the dead. I mean, the Chinese do that with their ancestors. And, you know, we have the communion of saints, but within the communion of saints are our aunts and our uncles and our grandparents, and
absolutely
keep them alive.
Mm-hmm.
Can I tell you about my Aunt Mary?
I would love to hear about your Aunt Mary, Mike.
I love my Aunt Mary. She was Italian and from the old country. And in her bedroom, on her dresser, she had a statue of every saint who ever lived. Mm-hmm. You know, Mother Cabrini, Teresa of Lisieux, Francis of Assisi. It was like Star Wars. And all these figures. And she used to tell me stories about them. Mm-hmm. Now that's not old-fashioned, is it?
Well, I hope not. Well, my mom has that on above. I took a picture of it. She got really mad. Above the armoire in her bedroom, where she has her TV, above it, she has St. Jude, San Judas Tadeo, who's very important, the patron saint of people causes. I'm sure that's because of me. She has a Lady of Charity up there. She's got St. Lazarus up there.
Oh.
All kinds of different people, you know, a little pantheon that keeps her company. And pictures of her mom, of my dad, of people who have, you know, passed away but are still in that communion of saints, cheering for all of us. I think that's a really kind of vital part. And I know that at home we have our little kind of home altar. Michael, my husband, changes the altar linens to go with the liturgical season because we're dorks. We change out the iconography too. But if it's the anniversary of somebody's death that month, or somebody's birthday, we try to put a picture of them also on the home altar, just so that we realize that these people are alive in God and alive in our hearts. And that's
that is so awesome, Natalia. And I think if we get anything from this interview, and you've been fabulous, to do something old and make it new. Instead of giving something up, bringing something back. And that home altar and the rosary. Do you still say the rosary?
On occasion. on occasion. I think the last time I said it, it was more than a year ago because I was on the treadmill and I had forgotten my earbuds.
Yeah.
And I needed to be on there for a certain amount of time, and I hate running. So I wanted to sort of make myself focus. And I'm like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to do this run and pray a rosary while I do it. And I did it.
Yeah. You know, even if we don't say the rosary with our family, to start early with saying some kind of prayers. I mean, we have to say grace, right?
Oh, we do. We do. Yeah. We have that. Well, that's another sort of extra parochial thing. Are you doing that in your house? Are you saying grace? Are your kids, you know? And it doesn't have to be bless us, O Lord, which is very nice and important, but does get a little bit boring. We can also sort of make up our own. We still say a grace that my older son made up when he was like 4 or 5.
Yeah.
You know, and so you can throw other things in there. You can make it enjoyable.
That should be an essential, don't you think?
I'm sorry?
That should be an essential, don't you think?
I think it helps the kids. It helps my kids cultivate a spirit of gratitude for the people who put food on their table, from their dad who cooks it, but also the people who harvest it and plant it. And it also helps them to sort of live in that presence of God, or to be reminded that God is present in the house, not just in the church. I think that's a really kind of vital lesson of the last weird year.
Yeah, this has gone so fast, Natalia. We got 5 minutes. And I have so much I'd just like to discuss with you. Before we get to the end, let me ask you this. During this Lenten season, just say you could preach on Sunday from a pulpit.
Okay.
And it's Lent. And you were just going to talk to the people as your friends. What would you want them to know?
I think what I would want people to know is that it's okay to feel ambivalent about Lent this year. That we don't need to feel dour and sad in a year that has been filled with anxiety and sadness and mourning. That we can give ourselves space to feel that, but that we can also give ourselves space to feel joy, because we are constantly in God's presence and constantly in God's care, even if we feel far away from that. And I think Lent is a time to remember that we can feel far away from God, but that God is not far away from us no matter what.
That's so beautiful. I asked you yesterday to read us a prayer at the end. Do you have one?
I do have one. So the prayer I'd like to share with you today, I'm going to read from the lyrics to a song. The song is called Caridad. It is a song to Our Lady of Charity. It is on my very good friend and fellow Cuban-American theologian, Tony Alonso's new record called Caminemos con Jesús. And he covers this song, Caridad, that was originally written by Gloria Estefan, who went to my high school. She's also Cuban. You see how I've given you a pantheon of Cubans here. So these are just the last couple of refrains from this song. It's a prayer to Mary. And so I want to share it with all of you. It goes, Mary, full of blessings, lover and protector, pray now for your children. Calm us with your kindness. In your path we follow till we come to you. You will reign forever, Queen of every sea. O loving Mother, we give you everything. Everything we offer, all our fears and worries. Mother of compassion, Mother full of grace, open wide your mantle and cover us in peace. Amen.
Amen. That was beautiful. Thank you, Natalia, so much.
Thank you, Mike.
So I want to watch this again so I can learn. So I want to thank you. I want to thank all of our friends at National Catholic Reporter who make this possible. Stephanie Yeagle and Brittany Wilms behind the scenes who do everything. Bill Mitchell, the publisher, and my dear friend Heidi Schlumpf, the editor. Thank you so much. And I especially want to thank Franciscan Media, who sponsors this show. They're one of the finest Catholic publishers ever, and their books can be read by people of all denominations and none. Great people work there. Their mission is to share the love of God and the spirit of St. Francis through their website, books, and audios. So please visit their website and explore several free resources such as Saint of the Day, Minute Meditations, and Pause and Pray. God bless you, everybody, and thank you.